Part 9. The Fugitive. County Roscommon, November 1847. Kevin left before dawn. He carried no trunk, no keepsakes beyond two possessions that had come to mean more to him than anything else in the world. In one pocket rested Anne's silver crucifix. In the other lay Michael's little wooden boat. Everything else he owned remained behind in Patrick's cottage. A blanket, an extra shirt, a pair of worn boots. If the constabulary searched the house, there'd be little to suggest he had vanished in haste. Patrick walked with him as far as the old stone bridge beyond the village. Neither brother spoke for nearly a mile. At last Patrick broke the silence. "If you stay on the roads, they'll find you." "I know." "I've friends west of Boyle," Kevin nodded. "They'll hide you for a day or two. And after that?" Patrick looked away. "After that, you'll have to trust God." Kevin smiled faintly. "I've been trying to do that for 3 years. The brothers embraced. It was awkward. Irishmen of their generation seldomly showed affection openly, but neither cared who might see. Patrick stepped back. "If anyone asks, they'll hear I left yesterday." "And if they ask where?" Kevin shook his head. "You truly won't know." Patrick understood. The less a man knew, the less he could betray. By afternoon, Kevin was crossing bogland that seemed to stretch forever. The November wind swept unhindered across the open country. The heather had turned brown. The pools reflected the cold, steel-grey sky. He kept well away from villages, well away from roads. Twice he threw himself behind stone walls as mounted constables passed within yards of him. Each time his heart hammered against his ribs. Not because he feared guilt, because he feared injustice. That evening he reached the cottage of an elderly widow named Mrs. Hanley. Patrick had given him no letter of introduction, only a name. The old woman opened the door before he had a chance to knock. "You're Patrick's brother." "I am." "Come in." She neither asked questions nor expected answers. There was cabbage soup waiting, a dry place beside the fire, fresh straw in the loft. Such quiet kindness had become one of Ireland's last remaining riches. The next morning Mrs. Hanley handed Kevin a folded newspaper. "I thought you should read, or rather, I'll read it to you." She adjusted her spectacles. The report described the continuing investigation into Major Mahon's murder. Authorities believed the attackers had escaped. Several suspects had been detained. Others were being sought for questioning. Rewards had been increased. The article concluded with a list of districts where searches were continuing: Roscommon, Boyle, Strokestown, Tulsk. Kevin listened without interruption, and when she finished, the old woman folded the newspaper. "They're frightened." "So am I." She looked at him carefully. "Did you kill the man?" Kevin met her eyes. "No." She nodded once. "Don't let them catch you before they discover that." For the next week, Kevin moved from farm to farm, never staying longer than 2 nights. Sometimes 1. A blacksmith hid him in his forge. A schoolteacher offered him a place in the hayloft. A parish priest quietly unlocked an unused stable behind a chapel and left food without asking questions. No one asked whether he belonged to a secret society. No one asked whether he had attended meetings. Only one question mattered. "Are you hunted?" His answer was always the same: yes. For many, that alone was reason enough to help him. Late one evening, a young messenger found him. "I've something for Kevin Kiely." Kevin hesitated before stepping forward. The boy handed him a folded letter. There was 6pence for delivering it. "Who gave it to you?" "A priest." The boy shrugged. "I don't know his name." The handwriting was unmistakable. Anne. His hands trembled as he unfolded the paper. She wrote of Liverpool, of crowded streets, smoke that never seemed to clear, long hours in the textile mill with Bridget. Maeve had begun attending a parish school. She was learning to read properly. She still asked about her father every day. The final lines were written more carefully than the rest. "Wherever you are, remember that anger is a poor companion. Come to us when you can. We have little, but it is enough if we're together." Kevin read those words until dusk, then folded the letter and placed it beside the crucifix. 2 days later, he learned how close danger truly was. He had taken shelter inside an abandoned sheepfold when voices drifted across the field. 3 constables, 1 carried a list. "The Kerry man, that's the one. They say he attended the meetings. They say a great many things. If we find him, there'll be a reward." Their voices faded into the wind. Kevin remained perfectly still for nearly an hour after they had gone. It was no longer merely suspicion. They were looking specifically for him. As November wore on, the countryside grew harsher. Cold rain soaked through his coat. Boots wore thin. Food became scarcer, yet the loneliness proved harder to endure than hunger. He missed conversation. He missed Anne. He missed Maeve's endless questions. Most of all, he missed Sean and Michael. Often at night he imagined hearing them laughing outside some unseen cottage. Then he would awaken to silence. One evening he reached the ruins of an old monastery. The roof had long ago disappeared. Only weathered stone arches remained. He built a tiny fire inside from the road. There, beneath the broken walls, he met another traveller. The man introduced himself simply as Brendan. He was perhaps 50 years old, with the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime outdoors. "You've the look of a man running from something." Kevin smiled sadly. "I suppose I do." Brendan poked at the fire, or towards something. "What do you mean?" "No man walks alone unless he hopes to find something at the end." Kevin thought for a long time before answering, "My family." Brendan nodded. "Then keep walking." The next morning Brendan was gone before sunrise. In his place lay half a loaf of brown bread. Nothing more. Kevin smiled. In Ireland, for all her suffering, had not entirely forgotten generosity. That afternoon, as he skirted the edge of Boyle, another messenger found him. This time the news was far worse than any letter. Patrick's cottage had been searched. Questions had been asked. His brother briefly detained. Released only because no evidence connected him with the murder. "They'll watch him now," the messenger warned. "They'll watch everyone who knew you." Kevin closed his eyes. He'd become a danger to those he loved merely by remaining in Ireland. For the first time since leaving Kerry, a thought entered his mind that he had stubbornly resisted. Perhaps Ireland could no longer be his home. Not because he no longer loved her, but because she had become too dangerous for anyone who offered him shelter. As darkness settled over the countryside, Kevin turned his steps westward once more. He didn't know yet where the road would end, only that staying where he was would eventually destroy not only himself, but those who had shown him kindness. Part 10. Across the Water. Late November 1847. Winter arrived early. The hedgerows had surrendered their leaves, and each morning the fields glittered beneath a brittle layer of frost that disappeared only when the pale afternoon sun climbed above the clouds. Kevin had been living from one borrowed shelter to another for nearly a month. He no longer measured time by dates. He measured it by the kindness of strangers. A loaf of bread, a dry blanket, a stable where a man could sleep without fear of being awakened by the knock of the constabulary. He spent several nights in the loft above the forge of an old blacksmith named Aidan Burke. The forge stood well away from the nearest road, hidden behind a stand of ash trees. The ringing of hammer upon anvil covered every conversation. It was a useful place for men who preferred not to be overheard. Aidan was a man of few words. On Kevin's second evening there, he finally spoke. "They've arrested 3 more. Kevin looked up from the small fire. "For the murder?" Aidan nodded. "So the papers say. Do they have the right men?" The blacksmith shrugged. "I've stopped pretending I know." Aidan laid another piece of iron upon the glowing coals. "You've become something of a ghost." Kevin smiled wearily. "I don't feel much like one." "They're looking for you." "I know. And yet no one seems able to find you." Kevin stirred the fire with a stick. "That says more about the people hiding me than it does about me." Aidan gave the faintest hint of a smile. "There are still decent folk left in Ireland." 3 nights later, after darkness had settled, there came another quiet knock. It was Liam. His coat was soaked from steady rain. "You'll have to leave Roscommon." Kevin nodded. "I've reached the same conclusion. The roads east are watched, I've heard. The ports in Dublin and Cork are watched as well." Kevin frowned. "So where do I go?" Liam hesitated. "There are smaller harbours along the west coast. Fishing boats, coastal traders, French ships." The words hung in the air. France. Kevin had never imagined leaving Ireland for anywhere but England. Even then, only to rejoin Anne and Maeve. Now another possibility had appeared. Over the following days, Kevin had passed quietly from one trusted household to another. No one used surnames. No one asked unnecessary questions. Each person seemed to know only the next step, nothing more. It struck Kevin that secrecy itself had become a kind of protection. If no one possessed the whole story, no one could betray it. One evening he found himself sheltered in the home of a retired schoolmaster named Mr. Doyle. Books lined every wall. Many had not been opened in years. The old man poured 2 cups of weak tea. "You know," he said, "History has a particular habit." Kevin looked up. "It remembers famous men, but forgets ordinary ones." He gestured toward the shelves. Kings, generals, politicians, they fill these books. And the tenant who buried 3 children, the widow who walked to Liverpool, the fishermen lost in a storm. He shook his head. They disappear. Kevin stared into his cup. "My sons will disappear. Only if no one tells their story." That night Kevin wrote his first letter in weeks. His handwriting was clumsy. Writing had never come easily to him. The letter was addressed to Anne. He did not reveal where he was, only that he remained alive. He wrote of Sean and Michael, of Patrick, of Roscommon. He wrote of the kindness shown to him by complete strangers, and then he stopped. There was so much he could not safely write. Instead, he ended simply, "Tell Maeve I still carried the little boat." The priest in the next village agreed to send the letter through channels unlikely to attract official attention. Whether it would ever reach Liverpool, neither man could know. As November drew towards its end, rumours multiplied once again. More arrests, more searches, more rewards. Some newspapers claimed the authorities were close to solving the murder. Others insisted the principal subjects had already escaped. The truth was impossible to separate from speculation. Kevin no longer bothered trying. One cold morning Liam returned. "This is the last time we'll meet." Kevin looked at him. "Why?" "The fewer who know where you're going, the safer." He handed Kevin a folded piece of paper. "There'll be a cart waiting tomorrow night. No names, no questions. Follow whoever drives it, and after that?" Liam smiled sadly. "Your road becomes your own." The following evening, Kevin climbed into the back of a hay wagon without exchanging a single word with the driver. A canvas sheet covered the load. The journey seemed endless. Sometimes they travelled across rough roads, sometimes across open country. Twice the wagon stopped while voices outside questioned the driver. Kevin scarcely breathed. Eventually the wheels began descending toward the coast. He could smell salt in the air, for the first time since leaving Kerry. The sea had returned. Near midnight, the wagon halted beside a cluster of weather-beaten cottages overlooking a small harbour. Fishing boats rocked gently against the quay. Further out, riding at anchor beyond the harbour mouth, lay a small brig under foreign colours. Its lanterns glowed softly in the darkness. The driver finally spoke. "She's bound for Brittany." Kevin climbed down slowly. "I've no money." The driver shrugged. "Someone's already paid." "Who?" The man smiled. "In Ireland, sometimes it's better not to know." An elderly fisherman named Cullum led Kevin into a tiny boathouse. "You'll stay here until the tide turns." Kevin thanked him. Cullum waved away the gratitude. "I had a son once." Kevin looked up. "He's in America now. I've not heard from him these 2 years." He paused. "If another man's son reaches safety, perhaps mine did too." Just before dawn, Cullum brought bread, cheese, and a small parcel wrapped in cloth. "Open it after you're aboard." Kevin accepted it. "I've nothing to repay you." The old fisherman smiled. "You already have." "How?" "You reminded me that helping another Irishman isn't a debt. It's a duty." As the first light crept over the Atlantic, Kevin walked quietly towards a waiting boat that would carry him to the brig. He stopped only once. Behind him lay Ireland, the country of his birth, the graves of his parents, the memories of Sean and Michael, the cottage that no longer existed. Ahead lay uncertainty, perhaps France, perhaps freedom, perhaps merely another beginning. He reached into his pocket and touched Anne's silver crucifix, then Michael's little wooden boat. Whatever happened next, he would not leave Ireland empty-handed. Unseen from the shoreline, 2 mounted constables arrived in the village scarcely half an hour later. They questioned fishermen. They searched several cottages. One officer pointed towards the harbour. "Any strangers?" The fishermen looked at one another. Then almost in unison they shrugged. "No one you've not seen before." The tide had already begun to carry the little rowing boat towards the waiting brig. Kevin never looked back, not because he no longer loved Ireland, but because he knew that if he did, he might never find the strength to leave.